Can you guys hear the Sfardim davening over here? It's beautiful.
Sadly, no.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Chala, Perek Beis, Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Chav Beis, and we left off Mamish on the second line from the top of the Amid, beginning with the Mishnah. This Daf is a very Yesoidis Dike Daf. We're dedicating this Daf L'Refuah Shalema to Hatamim Michal ben Nechamadina. And we're going to have first in the Mishnah a case of a invalid chala designation. Really, the halach is everything that we're going to learn today, we learned already, but this is like the ground zero, and therefore we're going to elaborate regarding all of these rules. Chala is to be separated from dough, not from flour. If someone, knowing, not knowing, separated chala from the flour, that separation isn't only invalid, but we'll see how far do we apply this invalidity. We'll see it's going to ultimately come down to a machloikas tanoim. This Mishnah will also discuss the minimum share of dough. And when I say dough, I mean how much flour did you begin with that now is dough, that's machayev, the obligation of separating challah. So I know we kept on repeating whether it is 43.2 eggs, whether it is 5 quarters, whether that translates in halacha l'maisa machloikis. I'm going from the extremes, from 2.5 pounds to 5 pounds, which is takawai, we and many others, from when we are using 2.5 pounds, which is half of a standard bag of flour that you buy today in the market. If you're using that to make dough that was made together, you're mafresh challah without a bracha, because according to some opinions, that's already the shear. According to others, it's not. So when it comes generally to brachas, which generally are midrabanan, we don't make the bracha. Parenthetically, whenever a bracha is a biblical obligation, like as an example, birchas hamazon, if there is a suffix, whether you're chayiv to bench or not, we don't say there suffix brachas lahakal. Suffix brachas lahakal is dafka because generally brachas are only a midrabanan, but that is 2.5 to 5 pounds. 5 pounds or more, according to everyone, according to many, 4 pounds or more, you're mafresh challah with a bracha. But I'm not going to speak about pounds or kilograms. I want to speak about the Mishnah's shiurim. And ubehegdim, the following. What I'm saying now is not written that much, not written at all in the Mishnah, but from a liner in the Gemara, I want to already say the following. That all of the shiurim that I'm going to mention right now are the shiurim that were used from when the Torah was given, and they are called midos, in this case, volume measures, because you have other types of measures, and not to confuse one with the other. We're speaking about volume because flour is not a liquid, it's a solid, ki'ilu a solid, and when I'm saying volume, it's bedafka, even though there's a machloikis, whether it's the volume, whether it's the weight, very different. We're going with the volume. So there's midos, midbariyos, and we're going to begin with an ephah, sa'a, kav, loig, beitza. Okay, so 1 ephah from in the midbar is tantamount to 3 sa, or 3 sa in 1 ephah. 1 sa has in it 6 kav. 6 kavs make a sa. 1 kav has in it either 4 loig or 4 quarters. So when we're speaking about the 5 revayim, and you're going to read today in the Noise Kalim, and they speak about loig, a roiva of a kav, and a loig is the zelbezach. Okay, so 4 loig in a kav, or 4 quarters in a kav, and every loig is comprised of 6 eggs. You don't have to memorize this, but what I do want to say is that this is how it was in the Midbar. At some point in Yerushalmi, meaning when the Sanhedrin was headquartered in Yerushalmi, that was Kimitzi and Teitzei Soira, there was then Midois Yerushalmiyois. And they added the shtus. We learned about this many years ago, or let me speak different English words. They added 20% to the shiur. In other words, they pashut made every shear 20% more, as we'll get into more detail. At a much later time, the Sanhedrin was exiled from Yerushalmi. We know that the Gemara says it went 10 times, it was moved 10 times. Its final move from where it was abolished is from Tiberia, which is why we have a Messiah that it's going to be reestablished in Tiberia prior to making its way back to the Lishkas HaGazes. So Tiberia was a center, Tzipoidi was a center, to the point that the Sanhedrin at a time was in Tzipoidi. Tzipoidi is in that area, but it's in the mountains. It's near Tzfas. It's not Tzfas. I'm talking to myself because for some reason when I was a child, I always thought that Tzipoidi is Tzfas. And I went with that mistake for many years until finally someone corrected me. So if anyone is doing that, and when the Sanhedrin was in Tzipoidi, so that was the headquarters of Halacha. So Midois, Tzipoidi Yois, added again a shtus. Okay, what we're going to have in the Gemara is that there is going to be another midah volume measure that was used in Tiberia. Don't get nervous. Very little will be around this, but it has to be said, and we're going to learn a little bit on the Noise Kalim because that's the way it is. Okay, so the Mishnah is going to speak about the amount of dough. We already know the 5 reva'os. We're going to see again what that means, how it was. And the Midbari is Bekitzid. We're going to learn how that was translated when it was upgraded, when the Shiyudim became larger, Midas Yerushalmi, and ultimately the final Midah, the Midas Tzipoidi. We're going to have the din that challah has to be taken min hamukaf. Min hamukaf is a rule that we learned regarding truma. Min hamukaf, I know mukaf, we learn soiviv. Mukaf means close proximity. Maiseres don't have to be taken in close proximity. That means that which is being designated as maiser doesn't have to be in close proximity from the items that are getting rectified, that are being misukened because of the maiser designation. Doesn't have to be in close proximity, because since maiser is 10%, see how much you have. You know exactly how much maiser you have to give, and give it from wherever, with all of the rules. It has to be menachiyuv alachiyuv. It cannot be menachiyuv alaptur. It cannot be from this year to the other year, but it doesn't have to be min hamukov. Since truma is dafka not given exact, dafka not, it's given in proximity. Taka 2%, midas beinanis, midas. If you're generous, if you're stingy, but that, let's go with the 2%, is dafka not exact. So, but we want it to be close proximity. And if you don't separate the truma right near the item that's getting rectified, it's even harder to approximate, and you won't give a right approximation. No, approximate has 2 sides. Not exact, but not completely off. Because of that, we learned in our pagination on Daf Yud Gimel, a Mishnah, with no other opinion there, that you may not be toirim min hatohid al hatame, which is a chiddush. Now, that I cannot separate challah from a dough that's tamei, not only for itself, but for a dough that's toir, that makes sense, because why should the kohen lose out? It's not fair. At least if you have tamei dika dough from which you're going to separate truma, only separate truma from it, and your other dough that's tahar, remove challah from that, so at least the kohen should get some challah that's tahira. That makes sense. But you would argue giving min hatoid ala tamei is a virtue, because you have a dough here that's tamei. You have another dough that's tahar. We're going to learn in our Mishnah the shiyurim, which we don't do today for reasons that I'll explain. The shiyurim are that if you are not a baker, even if you're making food for a wedding, you're making big quantities, a private person, 1/24th. A baker is going to remove 1/48th. There is an amount of how much challah. So let's go with the 1/24th. I have over here a dough. I know how much 1/24th. I have next by another dough. Can I take from dough tahar, from it, a 24th for it, another 24th for the tamei dika dough, and be mesakin both doughs? Why would I want to do that? For the kohen to get challah dough that's tahira. You would say, of course. Yet, what did we learn? We learned on Daf Yud Gimel that you may not be tahira midrabanan min hatahir ala tamei. Why not? Because since challah is removed, close proximity will lead people, or might, a big might, lead people to put the doughs together. They'll touch each other. They don't have to bite into each other, but you'll put them together, and you're going to be metame the toher dough. What we're going to have in our Mishnah is another time. I think it's Rabbi Eliezer that argues with that. Yes, min hamukaf, but he's going to give you a formula where you can be toirem chala min hamukaf, and you can do it in a way where you will not be metame the toher dikado. So that's going to be a very important machlekes, and we'll leave the words of introduction as they are. Again, there's really no detail. There's no big deal. There's no big din that we didn't learn yet, but this is a very important daf because it's pashut ground zero to the basic halachos of challah. Let's go inside Chevra daf chav beis mas nisan. Says the Holy Mishnah, hamafrish chalosi kemach, if a person separated challah before it was dough from the flour. So number one is eina challah. And the reason for that is because since it says reishis arisoy sechem means the first of your doughs. So it is when you have a dough that from it you're obligated to remove. Now, look how far we take this. Not only is it not challah, but you would argue, okay, so it's not challah, but I gave it to the kohen. What were to happen if I gave it to the kohen and someone tells me, no, it was finished? And I say, okay, zum gesund. Let the kohen keep it. Can't. The gozel biyat kohen. Wawawi. In other words, the kohen must return it. Why must he return it? I'll tell you why. Whether you want to use the words marasayan, you don't need those words. It gives a bad impression. An observer who sees me giving the kohen flour and the kohen keeping it, what will that person think? That what I gave the kohen was actually challah, which means that the rest of my dough, or rest of my flour, is misukend. It's not. And even if I know, the other person might not know. So they said, not only is it not challah, but the kohen is not allowed to keep it. Now, hold on. But mitzat sheni, that ho'isa atzma chayeves b'challah. So first of all, this is simple. The rest of the dough, I want to say something. When the kohen returns it, I don't mix it back in. So the ha'isa means, now that I make a dough from the remaining flour, since the challah that I gave did nothing, so it's chayiv and challah. It's not fixed. That's clear. But the kemach that the kohen must return, here we say the following law. Im yesh boy kashir, you don't mix it back together. I'll tell you in a moment why. So you're going to make a dough from it. Now, every dough has to have the minimum share, as we'll see in the Mishnah. We already know the 43.2x. If it has that amount, it's chayiv and challah. That fits. Why is it chayiv and challah? Because it was nothing. It was stam nothing. But, so 1 second. So why would I make separate doughs? Like, take it back and put it back in. Because va'asura l'zarim. Aha. In other words, since when I gave it to the kohen, I called it challah, midrabanan, it did something to the flour. Which means, one rule, a non-kohen cannot eat it. Now hold on. I don't have to gift it to a kohen. So when the kohen gazel biyat kohen, the kohen gives it back to me. I can't eat it, but I don't have to give it as a matana. It's not challah. I sell it, but I have to sell it to a kohen. I'm saying all that to explain why the Mishnah separates the isa atzma, the kemach, put it back together. You can't put it back together. According Vasura Lizanim, but who holds that? Rabbi Yeshua, that it is Asura Lizarim. Amrullah, the Chachamim, they only argue with this last liner. Don't say it's Asura Lizarim. I mean, you made it so clear. Kemach is not challah. Not only that, even if you want to leave it b'matana, the kohen has to give it back to you. Befedish, it's nothing. It isn't. So they told him, they challenged Rabbi Yeshua, not only in the din, but with the story. That Maisa, there was a story. Ukefasa zakein. The word ukefasa teaches the maraful, the 11 lines from the top. V'chatfa zakein zar. Zakein doesn't mean a yid with a white beard. Zaken means a scholar. That a learned, no, there was a story that there was a learned person who was not a kohen, and he grabbed it out of the kohen's hand, and he ate it, to show everyone that kemach that was given to the kohen, b'diuk, the Mishnah says ein chala. Not only that, you can't even leave it biyad kohen. People should not think. Has no upgraded status. Anyone can eat it. V'haraya the zakin. A Talmud Chacham went ahead and ate it. So Amar lahem. So Rabbi Yeshua responded, listen, I know what you're saying happened, but it doesn't mean just because it happened, it was a good thing. And there are two versions of what he said. The one we have here, one we'll have in the Gemara. He told him, Afu kil kalatzmai. No, for him, even though v'tikan lachedim, but he ruined it for himself. What exactly does it mean? Let's leave it for the Gemara. I'm dafka doing that because there was another version that Rabbi Yeshua told him the opposite. That even though he was mesaken la'atzma, he was makalka lachedim. In other words, just because a zaken, a scholar, did something, doesn't mean that he did the right thing. Doesn't mean he made a mistake either. No, he did it because there was a benefit in here. This is a Chassidish version. In other words, he did it because he so did not care about himself. He was happy that he was mesaken lachedim. But what he did was a kilkol la'atzmai. Okay, so that's one machlekes that we're going to come back to. Guys, remember this machlekes. Okay, now, what is the minimum amount of kemach that you need, even though you don't separate challah from kemach? That's the Mishnah. You separate challah only from dough, but you don't go by the dough. You don't ask how much volume. It makes a lot of, you know why it makes so much sense? First of all, I'm saying again, we don't go by weight. We go by volume. And whoever knows a little bit about dough, you're kidding? Dough, that's chametzdek? The volume? What are you talking about? You ever saw the dough, you put it in your fridge, you come back the next morning, and the dough took over the whole fridge? No, you can't measure the volume with the dough. It's like before the cholent, after the cholent, you're different sizes. So we're going to the kemach. So how much kemach do you need to use, make into a dough, that now you're chayiv to be mafresh challah from the dough? And here's the words in the Mishnah. Chameshes revoyim kemach, only when you have 5 revoyim, from our words of introduction. I want a dafka farmish, or 5 loig, which is the same thing. You're chayiv in challah, and the 5 revoyim is midois tzipoiriyos. I want to just read this a little bit. In the Mara, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to read, look in the second line under the Gemara in the Mara folder. It's in middle. The divrei hamaschal is chameshes revoyim. All right, a lot of what he said, I said in the introduction. How much is the 5 revoyim, or the 5 loig? Vehem mem gimel beitzim v'choimish beitza, 43.2 chicken eggs. Now, shvoyel Yerushalayim. Now, when that means, whether it happened right away with David HaMelech, whether it happened later, I don't know. But for many years, the midos that he mentioned before, what were the midos that he mentioned before? That an ephah has in it, like we said, ephah has in it 3 saw. That every saw has in it 6 kav. That every kav has 4 loig or 4 devoyim. That every loig is made out of 6 eggs. All of that was up until we came to Yerushalmi. At some point, Hoisifu al Hamidoy Shtus, they made not the price. They made the volume, let me use English words, 20% bigger. How much is 20%, guys? A fifth. Shtus means a sixth. But we were familiar with this. Just like Choimish is milabar, or Shtus is milabar, which means if I have 100 then, and I add 20, how much is 20 from 120? A sixth. 20 from 100 is a fifth. I'm just saying the way Chazal speak, they're consistent. It's always milabar. So, shtus, nimtzeis, min shisha, lugin. Now, what used to be 6, because the measure itself was made larger, the same amount fits into 5. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Then, skip a couple lines. Ubitzi poiri, that's the final resting place here. Hoisifu oichtus alamidois, v'nase mishisha lugim, hey lugim. What he wants to point out is that the same amount, Aviv, the same amount, If you were to ask Moshe Rabbeinu when he's coming back now, God willing, you're going to ask him, how much is the minimum that you need to separate challah? You know what he's going to say? He's going to say 6 revoyim. Or he would say 6 loig. The Mishnah says, Chameshes revoyim. How did we get there? We got there because at this point, the Mishnah was written based on the midos sipoidiyos. Very simple. Okay. Which is the same amount. The amount didn't change, but if the measures change, just like how much is it in pounds? It's the same amount. And you see how complicated it became now in halacha to translate it. You have a Rabbi followed Rabbi Avram Chaim, no. But there were other poskim that other people follow. Saying in the Mishnah also, just from this change, sometimes you're going to read a chazal, you're going to read something. So it's good to remember this, that the Mishnah is giving you the psak bisman when the Mishnah was redacted, which was after the common was midos sipoidiyos. In the Gemara, we're going to have a midos tiveriyos, which will be different. Same amount, but they had a different measure. Imagine. It's like an exchange rate on currency, the same thing. It fluctuates. Okay. Now comes a big din. Listen, guys, there are many levels of purity when it comes to flour. Ironically, that nowadays we're living in a society that mitzadecha, they enrich. It's terrible. Enrich flour means sam hamavis, worse than sugar. They take out all that is good and they replace it with synthetics. The reason why many people, when they eat bread, they get bloated is not because of the flour. B'chlal, flour is the staple of life. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, so we have enriched flour, but then everything, there's a yichus of having a whole wheat. There's a yichus of leaving a lot of bran in it to a point. In the times of Chazal, that means the way it should be, is that the more pure, the better. The ideal is to have fine flour. And by a mincha, the Beis Hamikdash, they had the most, they sifted the flour 13 times to remove all of the bran. There's coarse bran, there's not coarse bran. What happens if you didn't remove it? So when you have this minimum amount of 5 revoyim, is it pure flour, or do we tolerate a certain level of impurity? And the answer is, if the impurity was never yet removed, and you plan to leave it in there, like now, it's part of the flour. If it was removed, and now you want to put it back in, now you cannot use that to hit the minimum amount. Very big rules. These good rules. So let's go. Hein, the 5 revoyim is flour. And what happens if you have sourdough in itself? Don't think about today's sourdough craze. Sourdough, real so'oid, is inedible. So what happens if you have in the dough, you have in it a sum total of 5 revoyim of flour, but some of it was introduced in the dough already as sourdough. One might have thought, oh, sourdough is not bichlal. Like a starter. The starter is included. Not like what I said, you remove the bran and put it back in, it's not included. The starter is included. And suban is fine bran. That mursanon is coarse bran. If they were not yet removed, and that's the standard, like now, you leave it with all of these impurities, it's part of the shear. You don't say, there's the 5% is a mamish, it's bran dafka for the body not to absorb it, for the body to get rid of the enriched poison. There's a whole mishagas, but we're doing one thing, we're compensating with something else. Okay, so that's a big thing. It says the Mishnah, chameshes revoyim, if you have, with all of the above, 5 revoyim, chayav. Aber nital mursanon mitoichan, if you remove some of the bran, and then v'chazar litoichan, now you can't count it anymore. Harei elu pturim, and the Gemara will elaborate on all these then. Next din in the Mishnah, how much challah must you remove? Just to know, nowadays, halachically, because of it being midrabanan, and because it's tamei, there's no minimum shear. Really, a mashahu is enough, even though many people have a minhag to remove a kazayas. But don't worry. You'll see how your mother, how your wife, how your daughter, they remove. Many women, they just remove a piece. But not when the chiv of challah is midoy raisa, even when it's tamei, there's always going to be a shear of how much challah must you remove. Midrabanan is the shear. What is that? Shear challah, echad me'esrim ba'arba. A 24th, the Gemara will give a reason for that. And this is whether you are making a small amount for yourself, or even if a yachid, an individual, is giving a mashal, he's making a wedding feast. That's where it was the most food. All right, a Horowitz Friday night big meal. What doesn't matter if you're making it. You're not a baker. Same amount, and even always echad me'esrim ba'arba. So it's not like if I'm making a lot. People say, we spoke about this when we learned Masechtas Trumos. There's two parts of a truma: the hafrasha and then the matana. One of the reasons why Chazal said that midrabanan you should give 2% and not less is because if not, what kind of matana are you giving? You made a hafrasha, but what you're giving are nothing. So that logic would be that if you're making a large amount, even if you give a smaller percent, the chal is more substantial. If you make a small amount, then you should give a larger percent. It has that logic, but it doesn't have that logic, because what we're saying is it's not about a yachid generally makes smaller amounts, has to give a bigger percent. A nachtoim, and even when the yachid makes a big amount, but a nachtoim shuwaisem, and makes no difference whether the nachtoim is making it limkar bashuk, which is he's making big quantities, right? And by the way, a nachtoim doesn't have to mean that you have a shop. He's saying a practical thing, that a woman that makes bread / challah in her home to sell, that's called a nachtoim. A nachtoim means you're not doing it for personal use. You're not doing it for your son's wedding, which is also personal use. There, Chazal gave you half of the amount. And that is echad ma'arbaim v'shmeina. Again, in the Gemara, we'll have the reasons, we'll have the sources. We'll leave it at that. Turning to Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis.
For a baker, if a baker is doing it for themselves, would that be?
If they're doing it in their home for themselves, I would say. If they're doing it in their bakery, doesn't help them. Very good. Now, nitmesi saso shegegoso yanusam. If her dough became tamei, she didn't know she was tamei. Anusa means she knows she's tamei. There was nothing she can do. Woman can become anida. It's not up to her. That's why she doesn't wear tefillin. It's not. She can't stop it. She's in the middle of making a dough. She knows that's a circumstance out of one's control is called an oinus. So here, you know what they said? Anyways, the challah cannot be eaten. Don't forget, these shiyurim are only midrabanan. So the Rabbanan said you can give even a yachid can give echad ma'arba v'shmeina. Oh, very good kasha. Very good. Now, nitmeis mizida. If there was a maze, that means you could have prevented it. We're not going to allow you to benefit. But what's the benefit? You get to keep more. Then the less you give, the more you get to keep. Then echad me'esrim ba'arba. Why? For the simple rule. Kedei shelo yehei choyte niskon. Okay. And so the kasha that Rav Shlomo is asking, which is asked by all of the Rishonim, that l'choira, nowadays we're shoygig, we're an oines, we're born into it, there's tumas meis, but the Mishnah seems to be saying that even if there's okay, so be lenient, but lenient should also demand that there should be the minimum of echad mishmainim v'arboim v'shmaina, and not what we paskin. So just to know, he quotes on the bottom here the art scroll that the Meiri says that, and the Rashba says it. It's not so simple. The others that we follow hold that then when the Mishnah was written, there was a possibility of Tara, possibility of Tuma, so they differentiated. Now it's everyone is Tamei. No, it's until when we choose to use the Mei Chatos that we can make, just don't want to do it yet. I want to say that clearly, that people are saying that they know where Moshe Rabbeinu's ashes are. They know, they see it with the technology that we have today. We just don't know it's, even if you need to put the afar of Moshe, let's halachically for it to be valid, we can make the mechatos today. And once we'll do that, then it will change. But until you do that, we can't. If we can't, so they were lenient again, no shear or minag akazais. Okay. Now,
practically,
yes.
whether it's a bakery or even when it's challah bakes, does anybody ever do a portion out? No, I thought they just take a small.
That's what I just said. That we don't do that. That's what I'm just saying. Even though other Rishonim, based on the Mishnah, the Meiri, the Rashba held, Taka Echad, he held that you have to give the shear of 1/48th. From the Mishnah, Echad, because he says everyone is an oinus. Everyone today is an oinus. There's nothing I can do.
The 1/48 is still a measure.
That's right.
They're just like,
That's what I'm saying. That imagine another way.
does any bakery take off?
No, because we paskin, we follow either the Machaber and the Ramah. We paskin, we have a system. Halacha has a system. That doesn't mean that there are certain great people that they'll follow that. They're not doing anything wrong with that. Make no mistake. But are there such families? I don't know of such families. What I know is that they're not. No one takes off a little nothing. I don't know. I don't even know if by me, my mother, my wife. I don't know if they take a kazais. Ich weiß nicht. I know what I see. What they take. They take a shtickle in Yiddish. Huh? Well. I think in the times of the Rashba they burnt it also. Okay, let's go weiter. Now it's amazing. This say that in the first chapter, in our pagination on Daf Yud Gimel, we said this in the intro, Cheva, that we learned this before, that you cannot be toirem chala or mafresh chala, even not min hatohoir alatame. We're going with the shiurim now. See, when there's no shiurim, it's like, what are you talking about? Shiurim. You have to give, let's say, 1/24th. So I have a dough on my right. That's tahar. I have a dough on my left. That's tamei. The halacha is from each dough be mafresh. Why? I don't be mafresh from the tamei for both, because the coin is losing. You're giving him chala tamei. Why not be mafresh min hatoir ala tamei? So we learned because of the min hamukaf, people are going to end up being metame everything, even though it doesn't demand for you to touch it, but it has to be in close proximity. So Rabbi Eliezer will give you a system, and if you can put up the picture, Kevin, it's going to be helpful, that give min hatoir ala tamei. He's not saying you're chayiv, but he's saying you could. And I will show you that you can do it min hamukaf mamish, and nothing will become tamei.
What picture, Rabbi? Sorry.
There's a picture. It's like the picture from the art scroll. It's a great picture.
Sorry.
The bridge picture. Nitelas min hatoir ala tamei. Nitelas doesn't mean you're chayiv, but you could. How do you do that? What do you mean? How do you do it in a way where you're going to secure not being metame the dough and the challah that otherwise is tohiram? Isa tohira isa tameya. So first of all, nowadays, you know what you do? When you separate the challah, you separate it. That's the hafrasha. Don't do this right away. First, take the amount that will be designated for. Why am I saying that? Because you're taking it from the tahar, right? We want that challah should be removed min hamukav. So I'm going to want that when I'm mafresh the challah, it's going to be mamish in close proximity to both those. Very good. So whoever has the Zoom, so here everything is fadreit, because really the tahar should be on the right and the tummy should be on the left, but zol zayin. So you have the tummy dough is on the right here in the picture, the tahar dough is on the left. Okay? First, take from the tahar dough an amount that is a 24th for both. It's a 24th from both doughs. That's the amount. That's called the challah designate. You see the challah designate? That's the noitel. Noitel, not to designate it, but that which will be designated. Now, take another piece of dough from the tahar dough or from the tamei dough. That new piece should be less than a beitza. What's the yichus of less than a beitza volume? Even though there's a machlokes rishonim, whether oichel could acquire tuma. B'mashahu, even the rishonim that holds that it could, everyone agrees that oichelin cannot convey tuma unless it has the volume size of a beitza. So if I'm going to take a little piece of dough that has less the size of a beitza, even if I took it from the tamei dough, shein tamei, cannot convey tuma. And I'm going to have that touch the tahar dough and the tamei dough. So I made a bridge on the ground. So now these doughs, both doughs are touching. Not only are they touching, but I'm going to take the challah designate and put it on the bridge. Mamish min amukav, because now mamish touching. That which I'm now going to declare challah is connected to this one and to that one, and it will not become tamei. So this is the bridge. Make a bridge. And why are you making this bridge? Because when you designate the challah, you want the challah to be min amukav, kedei shitul min amukav. And now, that's your solution. The chachamim are against that. The chachamim, pashit, are saying you might make the bridge mikabetza, even if you know that the dough that you are using to make a bridge will have less than the beitza, when you put the challah designate on the bridge, who told you it's not going to touch? The challah might be more than a beitza. You don't know how big the doughs are. You know this challah is for the tahor and the tameh. And I'll tell you more. Even if the challah that you separated doesn't have the shear of a beitza, guys, this is the machlokes Rashi Tosfos. There's a stira and Rashi, but there's a machlokes Rishonim. Many hold that the shear of a beitza by oicholin is only to convey tuma, to be mitame, to be mitame, mitachirik, to acquire tuma. A mashu acquires tuma. If I'm not mistaken, so paskins the Rambam. Okay. So therefore, they don't go by that, and they say very simple that you're not mafresh, not only not min hatomei ala toir, but also not min hatoir ala tomei. Now, chavra, my friends, let's go back. The Gemara begins focusing on the first machlokes in the Mishnah statement: flour can never be challah. And they went further. If you gave it to the kohen and you say to the kohen, "Sum gesund," no, vigozel biyat kohen. The question now is there on some level, since you were koyed a shame on the flour, is it for some halacha? So the Chachamim say, yeah. The Tanakama says that Rabbi Yeshua says that asura to azar. Like I mentioned, asura lazar doesn't mean you have to gift it to a kohen. You can sell it to a kohen. You cannot eat it. The Chachamim said, they didn't even say a peep. They said a maisa. The best way to argue, maisa Rav, about the zakein zar, the Talmud Chacham, that was choitiv. He choitiv biyad the kohen, and he ate it to show everyone that it's not asur to azar. That's now Omar Lohen. So Rabbi Yeshua knew about that ma'isa, and he told the now he's quoting the words in the Mishnah that af hu kilkol la'atzmai, even though v'tikan la'acherim. So we're going to call him a real chassid. Real chassid is someone who, even though he knew that he was makalkal la'atzmai, he did it, but he was makalkal la'atzmai. Now, what does it mean, makalkal la'atzmai? What does it mean he was masakan la'achedim? So the Gemara teaches, kilkal la'atzmai means the achla, he ate it. And of course he was punished. Why? Because he violated the rabbinic prohibition that when you designate flour as challah, even though it is not challah, but midrabanan, you were koyed a shame challah, zar cannot eat it. You violate an issur de rabbanan, you're going to get punished. That was the kilkot. Now, what's the tikkun la'achedim? Very simple. The inun achlin v'tolei bein. Because what was he afraid? Why did he do it? He was afraid that there'll be other cases where someone will be mafresh flour and give it to a kohen. They won't know that it's not valid. They're going to end up eating the remaining. But when they do that, they're going to be punished for their ignorance. Now that they saw me do it, and I ate it, now they have whom to blame. Now they can claim to the Eibishter, what do you mean? We saw this Zakein that he, one second. Oh, no. Other people who eat this flour. Slicha. That other people that eat this flour, in other words, he knew, the Zakein knew that people were not keeping this rabbinic law. Everyone knew that the flour is not challah. Everyone knew the kohen gave it back, but everyone felt if the kohen has to give it back and I have to be mafresh challah, this flour is garnished. Everyone was violating the rabbinic law. They were doing that anyways. Now that he ate it, what is he doing with that? I'm going to be punished for all of them. At least they can blame me for it. Rabbi Blauner is thinking. In other words, he was misaken lachedim. He took upon himself the judgment that Hashem will give to the others. They can now say he did it. Instead of making sure no one uses what's it called, the thing with the wheels, the scooters. This Zakein Nefcha took a scooter and he went on Shabbos. And now everyone else at least can tell the Eibishter that the rabbi did it. That's what he did. Wow. However, one second, not everyone has that version. That is Tanoi Tonei. Others say that Rabbi Yeshua told the Chachamim, no. Tikkun la'atzmai v'kilkal la'acherim. This was a Litvish gadol. This was a Chassidish gadol. Oh, how was it? Oh, so Matracht. So Zog the Gemara. 1 second. Tikkun la'atzmai. Tikkun la'atzmai means The guy was hungry. At least he ate. Tikkun means what he. No, what Rabbi Yeshua is saying what he did was wrong. But the words tikkun means mela him given hungrig. He ate something that's rabbinically not kosher. So he's going to pay a penalty. But at least there was some benefit. What was the benefit? I don't know. He got full. It gassing. Yeah, this is not a chassidish way of thinking. Let me just finish reading. One second. What's the kilkal achedim? The inun sovereign meimar the hipetura. Fakert. Because of his eating it. Because of him eating it. Why would they think? They would think that the dough made from this challah flour is exempt from challah. Faket, if he ate it, doesn't it mean if he ate it that it's not challah? But they thought it's exempt from challah.
Maybe it's like the remainder of the flour, and he didn't eat all of it.
No. Since he ate it, they thought that it's so permitted. Don't forget the amount, Danny. The amount that he ate. There's two issues. I got it. There's a rabbinic prohibition to eat it. Isim midrabanan. Why? Because you will quite ashamed. Let's put that aside for a second. What is it really, Aviv? What is it? It's chulin. It's nothing. It's just flour. Now, when you make a dough out of this, do you have to separate challah from it or not? What's the answer? It depends how much there is. If it doesn't have the 5 roivas, no. So he ate it. People didn't chap that the only reason why he ate it, Nishnor, he was not looking at the rabbinic law, but he was not mafresh challah because the takada wasn't a shear. When they looked at that, they thought that such a dough that was given, even though it was given back, they thought somehow because he ate it, it's never going to be chayiv and challah.
They didn't know there was no shear.
And they didn't know that the reason why he was not mafresh challah was because there was no shear. What he did was so bad that this was machshel other people to violate a doiraisa. He chayeves mi doiraisa. Okay, let's go back. Chameshes revoim kemach.
What should have happened?
You don't, according to Rabbi Yeshua, you don't mix it back in because asura lezar. You make from the other kemach that was not mesuken dough. If the other kemach has in it the 5 revoim, you're mafresh challah from it. Yeah. This dough this flour you make into dough. If it has less than the shear, then you're not mafresh challah because it has less than the shear. If it has the shear, then you're mafresh challah. In other words, even according to Rabbi Yeshua, this kemach is not holy. There's only one restriction on it. Asura lezarim. Why? Because there was a kriya shem challah on it.
It's not the shear. You can now make a dough out of it. And now what are you going to do with it?
Eat it. Sure. Whenever people made a dough, you're not circumventing. We learned 2 days ago. If I have a little. Also, no. Yeah, and then I sell it. I make doughs and I can't eat it. The rule, I have to sell it to a coin. I don't have to. I don't.
It have to go back to a coin.
It has to go back to a coin, but I don't have to give it as a gift. Very good. 5 revoim kemach. So we spoke about 5 revoim, and the Maraful already pointed out that in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, it was not 5 revoim, it was 6 revoim. And we're not changing the shear. That's the ikar. The ikar is that we go from midois midvariyos to midois Yerushalmiyos to midois tzipoiriyos, and that's important. And it's the same shear. What's the same shear? It's 43.2x. So the Gemara wants you to know there are other places that have other volume measures. Ravimi, b'shem Ravi Anai, you know how much flour that's turned into dough is going to be chayiv in the obligation of challah. Kav tiverni, one kav, not a kav and a roiva. Why? Because in Tiverium, that is the same amount. In other words, he was trying to emphasize it's, or I'll tell you, no, by us, I don't know of whether there was ever a time that the same word pound, that's what got confusing, was changed. That's what happened by us, because the same name of the measure changed. The saw, the whole thing. The ephah and the saw and the kav and the loig, all of it changed. All of it changed. It's crazy making. So if you're in Tiveria, one kav is this. A kav is the loy, is 4 loig, 4 devoyas, 4 quarters. Now we're going to open up. It's late. I just want to open it up just to remind ourselves. We learned in the first chapter that there are certain ways in which one prepares bread, particularly if the flour is scalded with hot water to the point that it's edible by the act of cooking. Even if you're going to later bake it, that's what they spoke about bagels. We learned there's a whole question whether you're chayav to be mafresh challah or not. Rabbi Yochanan was of the opinion that there is a real suffix if someone does chalata, which is they scald the flour with boiling water, whether b'chlal there's a chiyuv to be mafresh challah. There was a big question. And when Rabbi Yochanan told someone who did this process, he gave him an eitzah, never put together the 5 revoyim. Even though we just learned yesterday, at kedei kach, don't circumvent the obligation. That's when vada you'll be obligated if you make the dough with the right amount. So don't be a oiber chacham and make small doughs. But whenever there is a halacha question whether you're chayv to be mafresh challah or not, that was the chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan. Dafke, never make a dough in the right shear. Chad chalitar, one scalder, asked Rabbi Yochanan whether he should separate challah, whether he shouldn't separate challah. You have to know exactly how much they boiled it, where they boiled it. So he told him, I have a good answer for you. To get out of the doubt, he had a doubt. And the doubts are not good. So he told him, Ezel avid arbo plague. How much is the minimum share, guys? 5 revoyim. Make 4.5. Now, there's going to be a big question. Why 4.5? That's going to be the beginning of tomorrow's daf. Point is, it's a very good klal. When you're making less, if you would make 5 minus a bit, then we'll be mechayv to be mafresh challah, because we're very afraid that you'll get it wrong. They didn't have the technology that we had today, even in all these measurements. If you want to be vadai out of the chiyuv, that's the proportion of doing less, where you can say, now you're not going to be chayv, and a lot more of this to be continued. From 5 to 4.5. No, only to boil it. That's what the Gemara says. Because Rabbi Yochanan is giving him an eitzah to get out of challah. Adarabbi, he should have told him never make that. He made much more than that. That's only because there was a whole shiloh whether you have to be mafresh challah. So he told him, well, today, it's time to know. Today, if you